online girlfriend. Always said falling in love online was safer than in real life. Until she found out the man behind the screen was her own employee. Lately, my boss has been in a terrible mood. Everyone in the office has noticed, and the tension is palpable. Even the usual slackers have been on their best behavior, barely daring to check their phones. She's been working overtime like a machine. And of course, no one dares to leave before her. So we've all been stuck at the office until 11 or 12 at night. I've got dark circles under my eyes, and my skin is starting to break out. But here's the kicker. I'm probably the only one in the company. Who knows why she's so irritable? It's because my boss just got dumped, and, well, the person who dumped her is me. She just doesn't know it yet. It all started with my two-in online relationship. We met on a forum. She had posted a thread titled, "Why Can't I Find a Partner?" Curious, I clicked in her post. Red female, 5 feet 9 inches, 99 pounds, 25 years old, Ivy League graduate in management science and engineering. Currently a VP at a Fortune 500 company, earning a 7-figure outreach salary. I have a house, a car, and I'm gorgeous. Still single. What am I doing wrong? The comments were ruthless. Obvious bait post. Move along. Seriously, a 25-year-old VP? Either it's daddy's company or it's daddy's company. Come on, at least make your lies believable. Amused, I left a comment. Maybe it's your looks. Why not post a picture? I didn't think much of it and logged off. A few hours later, she sent me a private message. "Hi, can I send you the photo privately?" I was confused but intrigued. "Sure," I replied, figuring this could be entertaining. A moment later, a photo popped up. I nearly spat my coffee all over my desk. 5 feet 9 inches? Yeah, maybe in her dream, she looked closer to 5'2" inches. The photo was a poorly angled mirror selfie. She had her face partially covered, wore thick black framed glasses, and looked like a walking advertisement for outdated fashion choices. But her features were undeniably stunning. The lips, the nose, the eyes, they all screamed hidden beauty. She just didn't know how to present herself. And for some reason, she looked oddly familiar. Thinking who knew there were gorgeous women out there, so oblivious to their own potential. I decided to help, out of the goodness of my heart. Of course, I zoomed in and out of the photo a few times before typing out a long response. You need to work on your style. Change the glasses, go for rimless or contacts. Don't take photos from that angle. Tilt your phone slightly so the charging port faces you. Swap the skirt for something shorter, maybe black. And for the love of God, invest in better lighting. She replied with a simple "thank you so much." I didn't think much of it and moved on. The next day, she sent me an updated homework submission, following all my advice. Then she did it again the day after that, and the day after that. By the 5th day, I was starting to get annoyed. That's when she asked if she could pay me for my consultation services and requested my personal messaging info. I thought, why not? Money's money, and gave her my private account. A moment later, a familiar profile picture popped up with a friend request. It was my boss. I froze. My fingers slipped, and before I could stop myself, I hit accept. Panic set in. Immediately, I switched my settings to chat only and prayed she wouldn't figure out who I was. A message popped up. "Thank you so much for all your advice. Here's a small token of my appreciation." Then she sent me $5,000 with a note gift. No strings attached. I stared at the screen in silence. I double-checked her profile picture and the online photo she'd sent me. Yep, no doubt about it. My gorgeous online crush was, in fact, my boss. Well, damn, I thought, accepting the money. At least she doesn't know it's me. From that point on, I kept helping her improve her style. She on fast, and soon she was radiating confidence. Just as I was preparing to quietly fade out of her life, she threw me a curveball. She confessed her feelings. It started with a long, emotional message. A love letter, if you will. I skimmed past all the fluff until I got to the last line. "I've been wanting to tell you this for a long time. I like you." I froze. "Thanks," I replied after a long pause. "What?" she asked. "I appreciate it." I typed back. "No, I'm serious. I really like you, and I really appreciate it. Thanks." She was silent for a moment before messaging again. "Can I at least have a chance to pursue you?" I didn't reply that night. I couldn't sleep. The next morning, she started sending me good morning messages, then good afternoon messages, then good night messages. She kept me updated on her day, like we were already dating. I'm heading to work. I just got to the office. I'm about to start a meeting. Her persistence was unique, to say the least. I half-heartedly responded here and there, and somehow that only encouraged her more. A month later, things took an unexpected turn. I was scrolling through social media, admiring photos of models, when I accidentally shared one with her instead of my buddy. "God, she's gorgeous." I totally licked the screen. I wrote, followed by, "Here's the video." She replied almost instantly. By the time I saw the message, it was already too late to unsend it. Sure, appreciating beauty is human nature, but for some reason, I felt a pang of guilt. She suddenly sent a message. Is this your type? Attached was a video. It looked freshly recorded at a gym. Not the overly skull type of body, but smooth, pale skin, with a beautifully defined V-line, disappearing just below her workout shorts. As for up top, let's just say it was pink. The person in the video seemed a little shy. By the end of the clip, her face was flushed bright red. I was hooked. Got more? Send me another, I replied instantly. She hesitated, but eventually sent a few more videos, each one more dazzling than the last. I admit, I was completely seduced by her beauty. Who would have thought that my boss, who always carried herself with such restraint and composure, could be so, well, like this in it? How do I describe it? It was strangely thrilling. Just as I was thoroughly enjoying myself. Another message popped up. If you agree to be my boyfriend, I'll send you videos like this every day. As many as you want. People spend their lives chasing 4 things: money, power, fame, and beauty. The first 3 don't mean much to me. But the last one, that's my kryptonite. Well, I guess I could consider it. I replied. After all, it was just an online relationship, right? Of course. I set some ground rules. No public announcements. No changing profile pictures. No video calls, and absolutely no meeting in real life. She wasn't thrilled about the conditions, but eventually agreed. And that's how it started. We dated online for 2 years. She got better at styling herself and presenting her beauty. I was more than happy to reap the benefits. Her photos and videos became increasingly breathtaking, with her pulling off every look I suggested. I thought this arrangement could last forever. Until one day, she asked to meet in person. Didn't we agree from the start that there'd be no meeting up? This is strictly an online thing. Ich reminded her. She sounded hurt. I know. I'm sorry, but I really want to see you. I knew exactly why she was pushing this. A couple of days earlier, I'd gone to a college reunion. Afterward, one of my old classmates confessed her feelings for me. I turned her down lightly, but she didn't take it well and started sending me a bunch of gross, cringy messages. Fed up, I screenshot everything, posted it on my social media, and dragged her through the mud before blocking her. Since I was in a relationship while online, my boss must have seen the post. Figured she wanted to meet up to stake her claim publicly. But I had my reasons for not meeting her. There was no way I was going to agree. After dodging her attempts for a week, I finally got fed up and broke up with her. She freaked out, completely deflated, like a balloon with the air. Punched out of it. My phone lit up with her calls for the nth time. I side-flicked it face down on the table and ignored it. That's when Kenneth, my direct supervisor, called me over. Mason, take this proposal to Aurora. Kenneth's crush on Aurora was the worst-kept secret in the entire office. Normally, he'd jump at any excuse to see her. But lately she'd been in a terrible mood. The last time he tried comforting her, she snapped at him so hard he practically fled. I winced. Kenneth, isn't this a bit above my pay grade? Shouldn't you be the one to just do it, man? Don't make me repeat myself. Fine. Even though I'd basically seen all of Aurora online, meeting her in person was still nerve-wracking. Especially at work, where she was known for being strict, sharp-tongued, and downright intimidating. I hesitated and then picked up my phone. Since breaking up with her, she'd been bombarding me with apologies. I hadn't responded, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to cool things down. I quickly typed out a message. We don't have to break up, but can you please just behave? I really don't like it when people break promises. Her reply came instantly. Baby, you're finally talking to me. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. I promise. She even added a crying puppy emoji. I sighed, steeling myself before knocking on her office door. There was a moment of silence before I heard her clear her throat and say, come in. Her red nose caught my attention the moment I stepped in. Had she been crying? She noticed my gaze and awkwardly tapped her desk, popping off the proposal. Leave it here and head back. Her tone was noticeably softer than usual. If this were any other day, she'd have snapped at me for going over Kenneth's head. Still, the proposal wasn't up to her standards and got sent back for revisions. Naturally, Kenneth dumped it back on me that Friday. Everyone else left early, excited for the weekend. Aurora had left on time for once, and the office quickly scripted, leaving just me and the receptionist. I stayed behind to work on the proposal, promising the receptionist I'd lock up when I was done. It was well past 10 p.m. when I heard the sound of the door unlocking. My heart jumped. Who could it be at this hour? Images from horror movies flashed through my mind. I gulped, telling myself ghosts didn't exist, but I still froze, holding my breath. Then a familiar figure stepped into view. It was Aurora. Why are you still here? Don't you have a home to go to? She asked, clearly surprised. Primivit bakaratort. Whose fault do you think this is? Proposal's due soon, and I didn't want to risk it being incomplete tomorrow. Figured I'd stay late and finish it. Expression softened. Oh, that one. Let me help you, Fro. It'll go faster if I explain what I want directly. I froze. My computer was logged into my personal account, the one I used to message her. She walked over. Pull it up for me. I'll take a look. Panic set in. My mind raced as I stalled for time. Wait a second. I blurted, my hand slamming down on the laptop lid before my brain could even process the movement. The sharp, plastic clack of the laptop closing rattled the loose paper clips in my desk organizer, echoing loudly in the cavernous, mostly empty office. Aurora stopped in her tracks. Her hand, which had been reaching toward my keyboard, hovered inches away in the dim fluorescent light. She slowly pulled her hand back, crossing her arms as she looked down at me. Behind her rimless glasses, the very ones I'd spent 3 days convincing her to buy over our private chat, her dark eyes narrowed to razor-thin slits. "Mason," she asked, her voice dropping into that quiet, dangerously calm tone she usually reserved for subcontractors she was about to fire. "Is there a reason you look like you just witnessed a murder?" "No, no, not at all, boss," I stammered, my palms sweating profusely against the plastic lid of my laptop. I could feel my pulse hammering against my ribs. "It's just, I have a really bad habit of keeping my personal financial documents open in the background. Banking info, tax returns, that sort of thing. I didn't want to compromise my data." She stared at me for 3 agonizing seconds. The silence in the office was so thick you could hear the low hum of the vending machine down the hall. Then, to my absolute surprise, she let out a soft, dry laugh. It was a sound I had rarely, if ever, heard her make in the office. "Mason, I run a multi-million-dollar division," she said, her voice softening slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "I assure you, I have no interest in your credit score or your tax returns. Open the laptop. I'm not going to steal your identity." "Oh, but you will steal my soul if you see what's on that screen," I thought, my throat completely dry. If I opened that laptop right now, the massive chat client window would be plastering the screen. It was logged into my private account, showing her contact name, which I had affectionately saved as Silly Girl, and a scrolling history of her sending me workout videos, crying emoji updates, and paragraphs of emotional confessions. I had to act, and I had to do it without her noticing. "Right, of course. Just give me 1 second to secure the files," I said, offering a weak, trembling smile. Under the guise of adjusting the laptop, I slipped my hand under the slightly raised edge of the screen, keeping the display angled sharply away from her view. Relying entirely on muscle memory, my thumb found the trackpad. I blindly clicked and dragged, hitting a shortcut to force close the active chat window, and then mashed 1+D to clear the desktop. Once I was reasonably sure the evidence was buried, I opened the screen fully. "There," I breathed, letting out a puff of air I didn't realize I'd been holding. "All clean. Ready when you are." Aurora pulled up the rolling office chair from the adjacent empty cubicle and sat down next to me. The sudden, intense proximity was overwhelming. The faint, clean scent of her perfume, something subtle, like white tea and fresh jasmine, drifted over, immediately pushing the stale office air aside. She leaned in closer to look at the draft proposal, her shoulder brushing lightly against mine. "Let's look at the financial projections first," she said, tapping the screen with a manicured fingernail. "Kenneth's team always messes up the amortization schedules, and I don't want the board questioning our attention to detail." "Right." "I put the variable interest rate models on sheet 3, I said, clicking over. My hand was still shaking slightly on the mouse. As she began pointing out the areas that needed refining, my phone, sitting deep inside my front trouser pocket, began to vibrate. It wasn't a short, sharp buzz for a notification. It was a long, insistent, heavy rumble. A call. My heart did a violent turn in my chest. I knew exactly who was calling. It was her, or rather, her online persona. She was probably sitting in her car in the parking lot, or perhaps she had gone down to the lobby, feeling overwhelmed by her emotions and wanted to hear her boyfriend's voice. I kept my face completely blank, staring intensely at a row of cell coordinates while my thigh practically vibrated off. "Mason, are you paying attention?" Aurora asked, turning her head toward me. We were so close I could see the tiny gold flecks in her dark irises and the slight, faint redness around the rims of her eyes. Up close, the tough, unyielding VP looked fragile, exhausted, and incredibly human. "Yes, amortization. Column F. I'll adjust the interest rate variable to reflect the conservative estimate," I squeaked out. "Good." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her own phone. My eyes darted to her hands. She unlocked her screen, and even from my peripheral vision, I could see the familiar interface of our private messaging app. She typed something rapidly, her thumb flying across the keyboard, before locking her phone and placing it face down on my desk. 2 seconds later, my pocket buzzed again. "I'm helping that employee right now. He's so jumpy. I think he's intimidated by me. I wish I was talking to you instead." I felt like a double agent holding a live grenade. I had to reply to her. If I didn't, she would think her online boyfriend was ignoring her again, which would inevitably plunge her back into the terrible, cloud of doom mood that had terrorized the office all week. But how on earth could I type a reply while sitting right next to her? "Boss," I said, clearing my throat and rubbing my temples. I think my brain is starting to turn to mush. Do you mind if I take a quick 5-minute restroom break? I need to throw some cold water on my face. Aurora looked up, her expression softening in a way she would never allow her other subordinates to see. Go ahead, Mason. You've been working hard. I'll review the executive summary while you're gone. Thanks. I'll be right back. I practically sprinted down the hallway to the men's room, slipped into a stall, and bolted the door. I pulled out my phone, my hands flying over the keyboard. My heart was pounding against my ribs as I opened the chat and read her message. I typed back, don't be too hard on the kid. He's probably just nervous because his boss is a brilliant, stunning woman. Take it easy on him, okay? I wish I was there with you too. Hang in there, baby. I'm always thinking about you. I hit send, watched the message deliver, and took a deep, steadying breath. I washed my hands, splashed cold water on my face, just as I had promised, and walked back to the cubicle. As I re-entered the space, I saw her looking at her phone. The transformation was startling. The cold, rigid posture was gone. She was leaning back in her chair, a genuine, radiant smile stretching across her face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated relief. Ready to finish this? She asked as I sat down, her voice lighter, almost cheerful. Absolutely, I said, feeling a strange mix of guilt and profound affection. We worked side by side until midnight. By the time we finished, the proposal was flawless. Aurora stood up, stretching her arms above her head, exposing a brief, tantalizing sliver of her flat midriff. My mouth went dry, and I quickly looked down at my keyboard. Good work, Mason, she said, looking at me with soft, appreciative eyes. Go home and get some sleep. I'll see you on Monday. You too, boss. Good night. By Monday morning, the atmosphere in the office had shifted entirely. Aurora walked through the glass doors wearing a beautifully tailored, cream-colored pantsuit, another subtle styling tip I had dropped into our conversation a week prior. She actually smiled at the receptionist and offered a polite good morning to the design team. The collective sigh of relief in the bullpen was almost comical. Within 10 minutes, the usual slackers were back to scrolling through their phones, and the oppressive tension that had hung over us for days evaporated. But not everyone was happy. Kenneth, my direct supervisor, called me into his office around mid-afternoon. He was sitting behind his desk, holding a cup of cold coffee, looking at me with a mixture of jealousy and suspicion. It was no secret that Kenneth had been trying to court Aurora for over a year, only to be met with icy professional boundaries. Mason, Kenneth said, leaning forward and narrowing his eyes. I heard from the receptionist that you and Aurora stayed here until midnight on Friday. Yes, Kenneth. We were finalizing the proposal, the one you assigned to me. I replied, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Kenneth sneered, tapping his fingers on the desk. Listen to me, kid. Aurora is a VP. She's Ivy League. She's way out of your league. Don't go getting any bright ideas just because she felt sorry for your poor drafting skills and decided to bail you out. I don't have any ideas, Kenneth. I was just doing my job. I said, though internally I was screaming. If Kenneth only knew that the woman he was putting on a pedestal spent her evenings sending me gym videos in exchange for my affection, he'd probably throw himself out the window. Good. Keep it that way, Kenneth grunted, waving me out of his office. An hour later, a company-wide email went out from Aurora's office. The client had loved the preliminary draft of our proposal. They wanted a formal, in-person pitch at their headquarters in Chicago later that week to finalize the contract. And at the very bottom of the email, Aurora had CC'd the travel department. Please book 2 business class tickets to Chicago for myself and Mason. He will be presenting the financial modeling. From across the office floor, I heard the distinct sound of Kenneth slamming his office door shut. The flight to Chicago was a masterclass in psychological torture. Because we were traveling on a corporate account, we were booked in the spacious business class cabin. Aurora sat in the seat directly next to mine, separated only by a small console. As the plane began its taxi down the runway, the cabin rattled and the engines roared to life. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Aurora grip the leather armrests tightly. Her knuckles turned stark white, and her jaw clenched. Are you okay, boss? I asked softly. I hate takeoff, she muttered, her eyes squeezed shut. And I hate turbulence. I like being in control, and being in a metal tube 30,000 feet in the air is the exact opposite of control. Her phone, sitting in her lap, buzzed. She opened it with a trembling hand. I knew what was coming. I felt my own phone vibrate in my pocket. I couldn't pull it out to read the message, let alone reply, without her seeing my screen. So I did the only thing I could do. I turned to her in real life. Hey, I said gently, reaching across the console and placing my hand over hers on the armrest. It's just a little pocket of air. The pilots do this every single day. You're completely safe. Just breathe. Aurora opened her eyes, looking down at my hand on hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, She let out a slow, shuddering breath, her grip on the armrest relaxing slightly as she turned her hand over to clasp mine. "Thanks, Mason," she whispered. "If it helps, you can squeeze my hand," I offered, trying to play the supportive collie while my own heart was doing Olympic-level gymnastics. She did. She held my hand tightly for the entire 15-minute climb until the seatbelt sign clicked off. When she finally released her grip, her cheeks were tinged with a faint, lovely pink. "Sorry," she said, looking away and straightening her jacket. "I usually keep my composure better than that." "No need to apologize," I said, leaning back. Even VPs are allowed to be human. For the rest of the flight, she kept her phone in her bag. We actually talked, really talked. Not about pivot tables or client deliverables, but about our lives. She told me about the immense pressure of being a young, female VP in a male-dominated corporate structure. She spoke of how everyone assumed she got her job through connections, forcing her to work twice as hard to prove she belonged. I listened, completely captivated. I realized with a sudden, terrifying clarity that I wasn't just infatuated with the glamorous, styled photos she sent me online. I was falling deeply and hopelessly for the real, vulnerable, brilliant woman sitting next to me. The presentation in Chicago was a massive success. The client's board was so impressed with our financial modeling that they signed a 3-year exclusive contract on the spot, worth 8 figures. To celebrate, the client took us out to a high-end steakhouse in the downtown area. The wine flowed freely, and for the first time since I'd known her, Aurora let her guard down completely. By the time we got in the taxi to head back to our hotel, she was laughing, a warm, musical sound that filled the quiet cab. "We did it, Mason," she said as the elevator carried us up to our floor. "We actually pulled it off." "You were incredible, Aurora," I said, using her first name for the very first time. She turned to look at me, her eyes bright and slightly glassy from the Cabernet. "No, we were incredible. You're a really good partner, you know that? You don't flinch when things get tense." The elevator chimed, and we stepped out into the quiet, carpeted hallway of a luxury hotel. "Hey," she said, stopping outside her room door. "Do you want to come in for a bit? We should probably draft the follow-up email to the board while the details are still fresh. And, to be honest, I don't really want to be alone right now. My adrenaline is still spiking. My throat went completely dry. Sure, just for a little while." Inside her suite, Aurora kicked off her designer heels with a sigh of relief. She unbuttoned her blazer and tossed it onto a chair, leaving her in a silk camisole and her fitted black skirt. She looked breathtaking, bathed in the soft, warm light of the hotel room. She sat on the edge of the plush king-sized bed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm so tired of pretending, Mason. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing a character 24 hours a day." Aurora, the ruthless VP. "It's exhausting." I sat in the small armchair across from her. "You don't have to play that character with me. You've earned everything you have. You don't have to prove anything." She smiled, a soft, melancholy curve of her lips. "You're nice. You're much nicer than my boyfriend." I flinched, the guilt hitting me like a physical blow. "Your boyfriend?" "Well, my online boyfriend," she corrected herself, looking down at her manicured hands. "We've been together for 2 years, but we've never met. He won't let me. Every time I ask, he shuts down. Last week, I pushed too hard, and he broke up with me. I felt like my entire world was falling apart." I swallowed the massive lump in my throat. "Why do you think he didn't want to meet?" "I don't know," she whispered, a single tear escaping her eye and rolling down her cheek. "Maybe he thinks I'm ugly in real life. Or maybe he's married. But he messaged me a few days ago, said we didn't have to break up if I behaved. So I'm trying. I'm trying so hard to be what he wants." Seeing her cry broke something inside me. The weight of my 2-year deception crushed me. I had started this out of mild amusement, then continued it out of physical attraction, but now, seeing the genuine pain I had caused her, I felt like the lowest scum on earth. "I want to call him," she said suddenly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I've never called him. He always insisted on text only. But tonight, I need to hear his voice, even if he gets angry and leaves me forever." "Aurora, don't," I said, my voice shaking. "Maybe you shouldn't." "No, I have to," she said resolutely, pulling out her phone. My phone was sitting right in front of me on the glass-top desk. I had forgotten to put it on silent after the dinner. Before I could reach out to grab it, Aurora hit the call button on her screen. A split second later, the silence of the hotel room was shattered. My phone lit up, vibrating violently against the glass desk. The screen flashed with her contact name, Silly Girl, and my custom ringtone, the one I had set specifically for her private account, began to play loudly, bouncing off the walls of the small room. Aurora froze. She looked at her phone screen, which read, "Calling my online nickname." She slowly turned her head and looked at my phone, which was vibrating on the desk, displaying, "Incoming call, Silly Girl." The ringtone felt deafening, an undeniable, inescapable truth hanging in the air. With a trembling hand, I reached out and tapped the red decline button on my screen. At the exact same instant, the call ended on her phone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Aurora stared at my phone. Then, very slowly, her eyes traveled up to my face. The confusion in her eyes slowly hardened into realization, and then into sheer, unadulterated shock. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place in her mind. The styling advice that perfectly matched her wardrobe. The specific phrasing I used. The fact that her boyfriend always knew exactly when she was at work, when she was in meetings, and when she was working late. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. No, that's a coincidence. It has to be. I couldn't look her in the eye. I stared down at my hands, my voice barely a murmur. Aurora, I'm sorry. Her breath hitched. She stood up, her entire body shaking. Her face went from pale to a deep, burning scarlet. The realization of everything she had sent me, the gym videos, the intimate photos, the late-night confessions, washed over her in a wave of absolute mortification. You, she choked out, her voice cracking with raw emotion. You've been playing me this entire time? You sat in my office, you watched me cry, you let me send you, you let me beg you. Aurora, please let me explain. Get out, she screamed, tears spilling over her eyelashes. She pointed a shaking finger at the door. Get out of my room. Get out. I wanted to stay. I wanted to hold her and tell her that my feelings were real, but the sheer pain and humiliation on her face told me that staying would only make it worse. I picked up my phone, bowed my head, and quietly walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I walked the cold streets of Chicago until dawn, hating myself more with every step. The flight back the next morning was silent. Aurora refused to look at me, let alone speak. She sat as far away from me as possible, her jaw clenched, her eyes red-rimmed. When we landed, she got into a taxi without saying a single word, leaving me standing at the curb. For the next 3 days, she didn't come into the office. She worked from home, and my emails to her went completely unanswered. I knew my career at the company was likely over, but I didn't care about the job. I cared about her. I couldn't let her believe that those 2 years were just a cruel joke. On Thursday night, I sat down at my desk at home and wrote a physical letter. No screens, no anonymous usernames, no digital buffers. Just my raw, honest thoughts on paper. I wrote about how I had initially commented on her post out of amusement, but how quickly that amusement had turned into genuine admiration. I wrote about how her dedication, her drive, and her hidden vulnerability had completely captivated me. I confessed that I had fallen in love with the real her, the brilliant, fierce, hardworking VP who had squeezed my hand on the plane, just as much as the girl who sent me sweet morning messages. I apologized for my cowardice, admitting that I had been too afraid of losing my job, and losing her if she found out I was just a low-level employee. On Friday evening, as the office was emptying out, I walked up to her office. The door was closed, but the light was on. I knocked softly. Come in, her voice called out, sounding tired and flat. I stepped inside. Aurora looked up from her laptop, her expression freezing when she saw it was me. She looked like she was about to call security. I'm not here to negotiate or beg for my job, I said quietly, placing the sealed white envelope on her desk. I just need you to read this. Once you do, if you want me to resign, I will have my papers on your desk on Monday morning. No fuss, no drama. She didn't touch the envelope. She just stared at it, then up at me, her eyes unreadable. Please, I whispered. Just read it. I turned and walked out her office. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early. I had already typed up my official resignation letter and printed it out, fully prepared for the worst. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank screen of my computer, waiting for the axe to fall. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message on our private chat app. Come to my office. My stomach did a slow, painful flip. I picked up my resignation letter, stood up, and walked down the long hallway. My legs felt like a lead. I knocked on her office door and pushed it open. Aurora was standing by the large floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city skyline. The morning sun bathed her in a warm, golden light. She turned around slowly. In her hand, she was holding my handwritten letter. It was creased, as if it had been read and folded multiple times. Did you mean what you wrote? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. Every single word, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. I fell in love with you, Aurora. Not just the online profile, and not just the VP. All of you. She looked at me for a long, silent moment. Then, she let out a soft sigh and looked down at the paper. You're an idiot, Mason. I know. A complete and utter idiot, she repeated, but this time, a tiny, fragile smile broke through her serious expression. You made me style myself, you made me take better photos, and you made me fall in love with a ghost. I'm right here, I said, taking a tentative step forward. No more screens. No more secrets. She walked over to her desk, took the printed resignation letter from my hand, and fed it directly into the paper shredder. The machine buzzed, chewing the paper into tiny white strips. "You're not resigning," she said, looking up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But your online girlfriend is officially breaking up with you." My heart sank for a fraction of a second before she took another step closer, close enough that I could smell the familiar, comforting scent of her white tea perfume. "From now on," she whispered, her hand reaching up to gently touch my cheek, "if you want to see those videos, you'll have to take them yourself. In person." I smiled, wrapping my arms around her waist and pulling her close. "I think I can handle those terms, boss." She laughed a real, beautiful sound and leaned in to kiss me.